All right, hello. This is the Policy Review Committee, and we're meeting on May 16th at 7 o'clock in the Matthew J. Brook Building. Present are Connor Kurtz, Chairman, Monica Hamill, Andrew Basil, Gary Otto, and Anne-Marie Traynor. No members of the public as of now. And we're going to be reviewing Policy 004, Policy 201, and then we're going to continue looking through the 100 series. So I guess I will hand it over to Dr. Otto.
Sure, I'll get the conversation started. I just handed you a memo from Brian Subers regarding 004. If you remember at the board meeting up at the Voc Tech, he had brought up about making sure that we were careful as to not override what was in the school code with that policy. So if I recall, it was pulled that night. We didn't do anything with that one. So at this point, it's back on the table for discussion to see where the board wants to go with it. Subsequent to that, I had sent you guys out an email today where he suggested one of the other, I guess for lack of a better word, sticking points was what you were going to declare as an acceptable absence. And I sent you some wording from a memo that he advised. Did you see that today?
Yeah.
I know you might not have copied it out. So I think that's really what needs to happen with this policy. So I'll just open it up to your thoughts and what you want to do with it.
Did the other committee members get the memo?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes.
All right.
Hey, right?
Hello, Mr. Sermonero.
Apologies, Mr. Kurtz.
Mr. Sermonero now present.
Yes. We're just looking over Policy 004.
We had a copy of what that looks like.
What's that?
004.
I'm not sure which version I'm looking at anymore, so I just want to make sure I have it.
004 membership. I have the most recent if you want to put online.
Let me just see what I got.
It's really only that one paragraph that's under question. The one that used to have the 15%.
On page 204, it's in italic again.
102, 07, 09,
Frank, I don't need this
Don't
because I
open that
have
up here.
6,
memo from Gary, so you can
5, here's 04. So where do we leave it? That paragraph, a director who neglects or refuses to attend X number.
Yeah, he had recommended, it's in that memo there that I just gave you, what he recommended as rewording it. The one from Fox Rothschild, right there.
right now. It's
He's saying go back to 2.
Yes.
His concern, if you remember, was with the
Percent.
doing something that's not in the school code, getting you in trouble down the road, where your policy wouldn't have any legal standing if it's more restrictive than the school code makes it.
Is this what it is now?
You always have to defer to the higher source of law, and in the law hierarchy, the school code would be a higher source of law than board policy. And then the email that I sent you today is because after, as I recall the conversation, after that it became, well, I think you might have even asked it, Andrew. Well, no, you weren't there that night. Somebody you were there by proxy. Somebody asked if we could at least define an acceptable absence. And that might have been you.
That was me because I'm hot on this issue.
Yeah.
But did you get the email that I sent you today where he said about what you could call an excused absence?
Correct. I didn't get the email. No.
You didn't get it? Well,
I think what we talked about that's when we were at the Berks County
Correct.
Technology Center.
Correct.
I think what we talked about with Mr. Subers, and he said it would be acceptable, was I do recall him saying we can't go against the school code, and it's pretty
Right.
specific in the school code. However, we could define specifically what an excused absence is.
And that's what he did. That's what that email is.
Okay.
You and I got to work out your email problem so we can
Yeah.
make sure you get the email. But let me open up that email.
Yeah, I'll get on now.
Well, I'm going to do it too. I didn't copy that. That's why I forwarded it. Connor, do you have that email?
I do.
Yeah, I mean, I'll read it.
You want to
right
read
now.
it? Yeah, read it out.
He puts some language out, and he says, for purposes of this policy, necessary absence from the district shall mean absence from the district due to school district related business, unavoidable employment obligations, and/or emergent family matters. And then he goes on to say, I would prefer to use the original language, which would preserve both the board's ability to address the issue on a case-by-case basis and the affected director's unfettered right to seek judicial redress of any board determination.
In other words,
So vacation is unexcused absence.
That's, I mean,
I would just
don't know
use
what an
examples.
emergent family matter is. Like now you're trying to, how do you define that?
Right.
And what if I don't have a family? I'm just a single person sitting on the board doing my duty, and I just, I'm going on vacation or something else is coming up. And
Yeah, I don't think these are the only examples. I think these would be the only situations. I think these would be examples. I would say put it in the.
I can't speak for him. What based on what he said, I think his intent is to try to not tie your hands too much either as a board in becoming too prescriptive with the policy. At the same time, you're trying to protect your rights.
Yeah.
So that's the ultimate balance.
I almost think I prefer going back to our original and our original edit of this, which was when we said, or prevented by necessary absence as defined by the board member in question, and so forth. Because then it's my discretion as a board member whether I can be there or not. I realize it makes it a little bit more difficult for other board members to say, well, wait a minute, you weren't here and we don't think your excuse is legitimate. But at the end of the day, it shouldn't, in my opinion, it should be very, very difficult to take a board member off who's been voted on. So
what I think we're trying to do with changing this policy, or changing the wording specifically to the paragraph here, is to prevent in the future from this policy to be used as a leveraging tool
As a hammer.
to get rid of somebody you just don't like, and because you don't like them. And say, let's go look at some policies and we can get rid of it. We can use this as sort of a tool. We want the language to be such that it's real. If there's a real issue with someone who does not want to participate anymore, then this is our way to get them out, but not to be used as any kind of leverage because 8 of the board members don't like one of the others.
or even 5.
Or even 5. 5 of the board members don't.
5 is the magic number on a board.
So that's what the language is I'm trying to get to, is just to prevent it from being used in that way, or even thought to be used in that way.
If you want, I just went back to the old one, the very first one, and it reads, now it has the 2 successive meetings, but it says, unless detained by sickness or prevented by necessary absence from the district.
Necessary absence is what we wanted to clarify. If we could blow that out and say, give some examples of what necessary absence is. And again, like Mr. Kurtz said, you can't pick them all, but at least you can give some.
Yeah.
And if those some include business-related things, family issues at home. I
Just
take a
say
vacation.
family-related.
It's fine.
If you say family-related, then that takes your issue.
Examples of necessary absence include, but are not limited to, work.
Do you want to throw it out there, or would you rather it's defined by?
We can keep them both, right?
No, not what he's suggesting. You can't have it both ways there.
So my only concern with lists is
they become delimiting.
Yes, and I think that's what Brian's concern was. Vague is better for both parties, right? Vague is better because a board can sort of say, well, look, we just determine necessary absence to mean X, Y, Z.
In this case,
the board member has the option to say, well, I define necessary absence as, hey, look, I can't be in 2 places at the same time. I chose to be someplace else on that particular occasion, and that was a necessary absence for me to be at that other meeting or that other event or whatever the case may be.
Perhaps there's some. I agree. Perhaps there's some language we can insert at the end, letting people know that this should not be used as a tool. This is, I don't know how we could word that, but just it wouldn't have any. I don't know. It would be a guideline, maybe. I don't know how to word it, but just to let the board members and the public know that removal can only occur in extreme cases of neglect of duty or something like that. I don't know how we could word that.
Is there an issue? What's the issue with using the original school code language?
I don't have a problem with the original language. I think the issue was when we first brought this up, the concern was who is determining what a necessary absence is. And that was the issue. Is it the majority of the board that determines what a necessary absence is, or is it the person that's being forced off that's determining what's a necessary absence?
But isn't
my choice is I'd rather it's the defendant who says I'm defining what a necessary absence is, so that the burden is much greater for the board to move somebody off.
Well, what I was going to suggest is maybe it being vague in that regard is a help. Where I said it was necessary. That's what you don't need to define necessary. I wasn't here. It was necessary. End of story. Could it be that simple? I think the more vague it is, the less you can get hemmed in by your own words.
But isn't the original intent by school code that, let's say somebody is appointed and you see them twice a year and they come on twice a year and say, oh, I was busy the other time and to me that was important days, and so you lose.
You're right, to an extreme. That is a scenario.
You know, you need something.
Some balance.
Right. And maybe what Frank said, you know, that as long as there's no willful neglect of their responsibilities as a board member, you have them, they can Skype in now.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So they have another option, whereas years ago they couldn't.
Right.
But otherwise, it's all going to be semantics.
Yeah, I think you're right. I mean, that's what it all boils down to. We're trying to tighten it up, but it all boils
And I
down
understand
to
Andrew's
interpretation
point that somewhere down the road, a group of 5 people could just not agree with the individual who's absent frequently, and it become this, you know, cause.
Well, it's not even that. My concern was really one of, you know, we had board members that were actively trying to use this clause to push somebody off the board for no other reason than they just didn't.
They could.
They just didn't like that person's position on issues, and that I find frightening. I think that is a travesty to use some sort of parliamentary procedure or your policies to find a way to take somebody out just because you don't agree with them.
But with the way this policy is worded even now, I think there's appropriate redress for the aggrieved party to say, no, you can't do that to me. Even though you can't do this kangaroo court against me.
Where's the procedure? I mean, maybe what we need to do is we need to look at what is the procedure then.
But going back to Gary before you go further, the last sentence in that says, or by a majority vote of the board. So it's saying even if you come and plead your case, the last sentence in that paragraph still says...
But that's school code language.
Yeah, well, I'm reading right from where we are right now.
But I mean, isn't that...
Well, that's what we're saying, is that, like, look, if 5 people on this board decide we want to get rid of Monica, I'm going to use Monica as an example.
Someone raises
nobody would ever want to.
Someone brings it from the floor.
Somebody says, look, you know, Ms. Hamill's missed 2 consecutive meetings, and, you know, I just feel like she needs to go because that shows a dereliction of duty and blah, 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 blah. And 4 other people agree because they just don't like the way Ms. Hamill sits on her position on issues. And now all of a sudden there's a vote, and she now has the burden of defending herself in some process. The process is not even defined here.
I don't think it's defined in the school code either.
In our policies and procedures. And then who's the judge and jury of that process?
Right.
The same 5 people that kicked her off?
And what our concern here with that is Monica was elected by the people, and now she's being unelected by
the corporate body.
Right.
Some of whom may not even have been elected.
Right.
Well, that's another wrinkle, but yes.
So does that last sentence have to be in the policy?
Well, no. I mean, this says, hey, look, you know, I mean, at some point you have to bring some sort of charge up, right? I mean, if somebody is...
That does, Anne Marie, if that's part of the school code.
If somebody's just staying home and watching Monday Night Football, and it's happening repeatedly, the board needs to be able to act to get that person off and say, look, you either got to sit and serve or step aside so we can play something.
Or if they say, you know what, I decided to coach my kids baseball, and I find that's more important, so I'm not going to come to any of the meetings.
Yeah, that's a necessary absence, right?
And they can say it's a necessary absence, but they're not at any meetings because they decided, I'm going to go volunteer, even though I've been elected to do this and show up. I've got some coaching thing that I'm going to do every single
go for the entire fall season
for the whole,
so August through November I'm not going to be here every Monday night.
How do you handle that?
Yeah.
Is it necessary? Is it not necessary? Is it
See, because the way the school code reads, it even says, if you read this carefully, it says, or if in attendance in any meetings you neglect or refuse to act in your official capacity. So that even says even if you come to meetings and you're derelict in your duty, who's going to define that?
I did notice that.
Who's going to define that?
Well, I think
if you sit here and read email or you talk or you...
I think part of this needs to be in this policy somewhere. In 4, there has to be the process for the hearing and the redress of issues and
I think that's the angle.
Who's going to be the judge and jury of that? Is it a court? Is it an independent arbiter? Is it the, who's making the decisions? Because
I think if this is school code, and we have this, and we're being told by the solicitor that we should stick with the school code
language,
I think we should say, okay, well, let's go define the procedure then, and let's make that procedure pretty tight.
Well, we can talk to you Monday about that.
So if they get to the point where they invoke this policy, then they have to deal with our procedure, and our procedure will be very strict.
Yeah.
And say, let's list the reasons that you consider this unnecessary, an unnecessary act.
Right.
We can fix it there if we can't fix it here.
Right.
All right.
So I'd be okay with trying to work through some procedure that.
Yeah. My concern is if the same five are judge, jury, accused, and judge, jury, and they're the ones that are going to be, because then they own the process, right? Mm-hmm. And quite frankly, boards turn over and they swing from left to right, and that happens all the time. And it can't happen on just a five. It happens gradually over time as board membership changes. And if you're going to have a process where five people could inevitably be there forever because they continually kick people off, and then appoint other people that they like.
And we really have ways of dealing with board members who refuse to perform their duty. They're elections.
Indeed.
But besides the process we're talking about, are we going back to the 2, or are you keeping the 15%?
No, he recommended that we go with this paragraph, which is right from the school code, which says 2, successive regular meetings. And it actually adds a line that says, or in if attendance at any meetings neglects or refuses to act in his official capacity as a school director.
And there's no real, that's very vague.
That replaces the last paragraph then.
Are we going to keep as defined by the school board member in question? I'd like to, but it's my opinion.
I don't know if that's as necessary now if we can define the process, because then what will happen is, I think if you, in the process, you can state, hey, look, this is how the hearing is going to be held, this is how it has to happen with X number of days, and the burden of proof is on the accusers.
Well, you can make a board guideline just like we do for other, but then the guideline.
I would rather have it in the policy.
Yeah.
Because policies have to be voted on by the board, and it can only be changed by the board. Guidelines can be changed willy-nilly by administration anytime they feel.
Well, we always bring guidelines forward for review.
In the future, that's not necessarily
how. Whatever flavor you want, it doesn't matter.
Because some of our other policies actually outline a process.
Some do.
Right?
Some do.
Whether
That's
it's
correct.
discrimination or it's bullying or it's sexual harassment.
Right.
We outline a process for those.
That's
things.
correct.
And I think in something that's
usually,
important as this,
and the reason that we do that is because the process is actually encoded in law. In the others where we have a guideline, it's generally you have some discretion as to the way the process can run at the district level. Some of them, like special ed, policy and process are the same thing because special ed spells out how you have to do something. It's very prescriptive. Whereas I don't know what the prescription is for going through one of these hearings to, quote, remove a board member. I don't know that.
I have no idea either. I think maybe that's what we need Mr. Subers to weigh in on, is do a little research and find out, okay, what is the process here? Maybe PASBA has a suggestion as well, and who presides over those types of things, and are attorneys involved? Does it go to a court of law? Like I can't remember what he said. I think he talked about it at one point in time, but over the phone with me once. But
my guess is for local board, it's probably local agency law, which is Commonwealth, or not Commonwealth court, but like county court. I think they're the first level for those kind of appeals.
Gary, you send me that email so I have that insert from Lori. I didn't get that today.
Which one? This
The one that
004?
Andrew is referring to?
Yes.
you want this?
Okay. I'll just give her that to change that paragraph.
I just found a news article on here. A Pennsylvania school board, the Lehighton Area School Board, was justified in removing 2 board members just because they did not show up to the reorganization meeting.
Well, that
Because they didn't show up at the reorg meeting?
Yeah. Uh-huh.
That's wrong.
That is wrong.
And the Department of Education is the one who said that. It wasn't even a court, from what I read. Yeah.
Well, we should get
that
Mr. Subers to weigh
scares
in.
the pants off of me. That people say, "Oh, well, you didn't show up for the reorg meeting. You're out."
But the question would be
The
whether or not the
almighty vote's not so
Lehighton
almighty
School
anymore.
District has in their policy the procedure.
Yeah. Looking back, this article was from 1987, but still, I don't know if the school code's changed
Yeah,
in this area.
I don't
at
know.
least.
I think that's a question beyond our committee's scope.
Yeah. So we're going to get Mr. Subers.
So the walkaway is we'll reinsert Subers'
We'll use the
suggestion.
school code, but we want the process outlined, and we need to review the process.
A defined process for removal.
Does that get inserted into the policy?
I think it needs to be part of the policy, yeah.
Okay.
Whatever it is, you make it 4-2A-1.
Gotcha.
We could do that too, like a teleconferencing policy. I don't know if we want to have a separate.
While we're talking about this, do you guys have the Skype policy anywhere? What we call the Skype policy?
That's 00. That was just revised. Teleconferencing .0060.1.
0060.
006.1.
I don't know if I have that one.
Oh, I might have. Yeah, right here it is. Just let me have that back. We passed that one before Monica and Connor came on the board.
Yeah, that was one of the last things the board did.
It seemed like
One of those meetings
seemed
went,
like 4 years ago.
That one meeting, it went on for hours and hours discussion.
About that policy?
Yeah.
Yeah, that was quite a... What are you looking for in there, Andrew?
I just want to check something. Wanted to make sure that if somebody was cut off during one of these things, that whatever action had been taken up to that point was
I found on
just about a quorum.
page 2.
If you're turned off, if you get disconnected and you blow the quorum, then they adjourn.
then the meeting has to end,
Right.
because you don't have a quorum.
But
It does
there's nothing
say-
that says that what actions you've taken to date.
Well, it says under that, it says such adjournment shall not affect the validity of such actions taken by the board prior to adjournment.
Right.
That is for if the connection is severed and you lose a quorum. I don't know. I guess we should insert that.
But
if
it doesn't
there's a quorum or
address,
not.
what it doesn't address is if, like that was my concern. So if I was on the meeting, and I was on the meeting for an hour, and it was a 3-hour meeting and we got disconnected, then is everything that happened in that prior hour
Yes.
still valid or not valid?
It is valid based on my interpretation of this sentence that Connor just read. Such adjournment shall not affect the validity of such actions taken by the board prior to the adjournment.
But I think that's only, looking back now, it's only for the adjournment. If the
It
quorum
doesn't
is
talk
still
about if
maintained.
the meeting still goes forward,
Yeah.
is everything still valid?
Why would it not be?
It should
It
be,
should,
in my
yeah.
opinion, because we've had plenty of meetings as a board where board members have gotten up and walked out because they had a plane to catch or there's been something else going on, and we had a vote so they could participate and then they leave, and it hasn't interrupted the validity of that. I just want to make sure, it just occurred to me when I was in overseas that, holy crap, if we're voting on something and I got a vote and all of a sudden it goes out 2 minutes later, is it null and void?
Yeah.
Or is it null and void because I was getting into the meeting late because we had a problem with the connection, and I walked in late, so to speak?
Didn't they bring this up at the meeting you were at about adjournment and changing the vote? If nothing was...
That was, I think, if you vote and then you want to change your vote, I don't think, maybe...
No, that had to do with
It doesn't speak to it at all, but I
Yeah,
I would treat it,
I really don't see a concern there because that's no different than any other.
I do remember. Well, I think what I recall was in the debate that we were having, there was a particular board member took the position was, well, if you can't be a part of the whole meeting, then you shouldn't be part of the whole meeting. You know what I'm saying? Like,
oh, so your vote doesn't count on anything?
Yeah. Yeah. That was one of the arguments that was being hashed. I just wanted to make sure it didn't go into the policy.
Yeah.
So I'm good with it. Sorry they didn't up over that one. We can move on to the next
201.
We're going to 201 or
Yeah, that's just because that one's been out there and just want to bring it
yeah.
Just before you leave the 000 series, I still have 010.
Yeah, we tabled that one.
So you want to just like...
There's so many coming at us right now. I think that one can wait till the end. I mean, that has to do with
board ethics.
Board ethics. I think it's important, but I didn't like PASBA language.
All right. So just
it was basically like drinking the PASBA Kool-Aid.
Yeah.
I think they brought that up at our meeting. Remember, Mrs. Hamill? I think they brought up the code of conduct.
Yes, they did.
So which one am I going to now?
201. Do you have an agenda?
Yes.
Okay.
201 was already provided. We have to make some revisions in it now based on the recommendation from CNI.
201 was the
early admission.
Yeah, but you're not going to have that wording. Walt wanted me to have it ready for him for September.
Okay. But I just wanted to have the discussion here so we can at least move it out of committee again.
The psychologist and I are working on the pieces he wants in there.
Well, let's just give the committee an update on what...
I think the only thing was you guys are just adding the language that if a parent wants it now, they just have to pay for it. Right?
We're going to identify 3 options for tests to be used no matter who's doing it, so that they don't use a test that isn't what we believe to be valid. And also to list 2 or 3 reputable testers that parents can go to and pay themselves for that.
So back that up a minute, if you don't mind, Anne-Marie. We are saying that your birthday has to be when?
Well, they're not changing that. Right now it says by November.
So if you turn 5 by November, then you can participate in the September? No, that's not right.
No. If you...
The
cutoff for the regular admission is September 1st.
September 1st.
So the parents who have a child between September 1st and in November, they think their child is a genius and wants to get in, and so they want them tested. But our psychologists are so busy during the school year, the compromise was, if you want to wait to the summer and pay our people, we'll do it for you. If you want it done prior to that, here are the tests that we'll take the results from, and here are the 3 individuals, let's say, that we will take the results from. We believe they're reputable testers, so you have either or. Either way, the parent has to pay for it.
Got it. I think that's fair.
So,
and that'll help you, right, with the issue you're having, or won't? Or
no, it does.
I think it does, because I think the issue that was raised was, one, the bar was set so high that these kids hardly ever pass, but then you can get so many kids that are just pushing the system, right? Because parents just believe, and you're unduly burdening the system with both cost and what's the word I'm looking for? Well, you're taking advantage of the time that's involved, right? Mm-hmm. So, I think this solves that problem. If we don't have the resources available, here's a third-party testing source that you can get, and you get to pay for.
Part of it.
Otherwise, you wait until the summer
and you still
pay
have to
our
pay,
people.
right? But it's cheaper it will certainly be cheaper. But we know. I mean, I could give you a list. If you said to me, "Oh, I want my child to have an ADHD label," how can I get that? I could give you 5 doctors you could go to today, and you could pay a price, and you'd come back to me with a prescription for that, and your child would be all but normal. And so there's people out there that would do that for you for early admission. Mm-hmm. So this way, it's sort of the best of both worlds. They have to use certain tests.
And are there time frames for them to make this decision, or can they approach you in the summer and say, "I want my kid tested now. Here's however
That's
much
fine. Yes, we would take them if they came in the summer.
There is a window, though. I mean, you have to abide by it. You have to be approaching that age. In other words, we're not going to consider you if you're not in that window of time.
Yeah, but Frank's saying if you didn't
I get that.
That's the population of kids.
If they come to you in August and say, "I'll give you money to test my kid to enroll,"
as long as we can,
is that too late?
No, as long as we can fit it in. I mean, I'm not going to get involved in that level of implementation, but I can't imagine that they wouldn't do that.
I think that's more than fair. I think
Right.
it solves the problem.
Is there anything anywhere in the job description for the guidance counselor that states they have to test all children? That there'd be anything there where they say, well, I don't want to go test at another place because it's more expensive, and this says that all guidance counselors will test all children. Is there
No,
any
school
wording?
psychologists.
It's actually school
is another
psychologists.
option. So you have the option of an outside agency, or you can request our folks to do it.
I guess what Monica's point is, do we have a job description somewhere for a school psychologist that says, school psychologist shall test every child that does whatever, and then as a parent who says, well, wait a minute, your job descriptions say you have to test my child, whether or not this other option of going to a third party is available or not. Your job description. We don't want to get pinched by some other rule or policy or description.
Well, we're going to put it in
we
the
have.
policy. That
Yeah,
says,
put it in our policy, but she's saying, is there a job description?
No, because
somewhere
the
else?
job description does not require our psychologists to work in the summer unless they're compensated for it.
Okay, because I just wanted to make sure that there wasn't someone who could just figure this out.
Every school district I've ever been in does one of two things with their psychologists. They hire them on a 12-month contract with union, like a memorandum of understanding, because they still are, quote, professionals under the school code. They're just like teachers or like counselors. Or they give them the same contract that everybody else gets, a 10-month or 9-month, whatever you want to call it, and then they pay them an hourly rate over the summer for time worked.
Right, I understood that. I was just making sure that the contract, the job description itself.
So because of that, the way we
we've
do
always
it,
done summer testing,
Okay.
but they also have been forced to do it during the year because there was no window that said only summer testing in a policy.
Yeah, I guess what Monica's point, though, is could I, or my attorney, if I've got a good one, and I sit there and say, well, look, I want to get my kid tested. And you say, all right, well, here are the options. You can go to a third-party person. And I say, well, I don't want to go to a third-party person. I don't even want to pay for it either. And so you say, well, that's our policy. And then I get a good attorney. He flips through everything, and he says, well, yeah, that's what their policy is. But now let's take a look at job descriptions for psychologists. And he opens up our job description handbook and it says, school psychologists shall test every child that wants to do X, Y, and Z. Also, we can look at that and say, here you go. Your job description says this. And guess what? If there's a conflict in any government documents, the tie goes to the least restrictive in terms of petitioner. So
yeah, no, there's nothing that says that they shall do all. And we've always done that testing for probably 20, 25 years. We've been an option for parents. So no, they don't have that they have to do all the children.
Okay.
all right.
And we've always accepted outside.
So the final approval for this policy will come in September. Is that what we're saying from a policy standpoint?
I mean,
hopefully it kicks out faster than that because you're going to be doing.
Well, no, we grandfathered anybody for this summer.
Until,
This won't become an issue until next summer.
Yeah, all right.
So September's plenty of time. I just want to make sure we have
I met with the psychologist today. They're on board with it. They were the ones who recommended the options. They're going to give us the testing. So
I believe the few families that raised the question were invited to come to the meeting so that they could get parental feedback. And I think you were there, so I think everything was copacetic with everybody that was there.
Yeah, I was there too.
You were there?
Yeah, they were supportive. They thought it was a good idea.
So it's in the works for correction.
All right, are we going to go to continue 100 series revisions? Are we done with 201?
Yes, we
All
are.
right, we're done with 201.
Policy 201 back in September.
All right. Now, we're up to policy 112, I believe. Mm-hmm. That was what we were emailed yesterday or today.
Mrs. Trainer and I can walk through these with you together. The policy that you see in front of you is just a program under the school code. Students have a right to something called homebound instruction.
You're talking about 112, right?
Yes. This policy is really completely compliant. We're just putting it out there for review. It doesn't really require any changes, but as we were looking at this, we want to make sure that every policy gets looked at and stamped, either reviewed or revised, or so the next person that goes to this policy book can say, hey, when was the last time anybody even looked at this policy?
Yeah.
So this policy is only 10 years old, but it has not changed in any way, shape, or form. It's completely compliant. with the law. It's straight out of the school code, and chapters 14, 15, and all the legal citations on this are accurate. So I really don't have much to say about it other than to say we're going to, just so you know, in the front here, we're going to put on a line here that says date last reviewed, even if it wasn't changed, so that when you finally re-vote on it, even though
we know when it was last looked at.
You know when it was last looked at. So
the only suggestion I have here is on line 9 of the first, or 8 of the first page. It says district resident of compulsory school age when the following conditions are satisfied. Should I say all of the following conditions are satisfied? Any of the following conditions are satisfied? Any or all? Like, I don't... Do you have to meet every single one of those conditions? Or is it only one or two or most of them?
let me look at that one.
All of them.
It's all of them. So you have to meet every single one. Okay, so I would just suggest putting in all of in there, school age when all of the following conditions are satisfied. Just so there's no ambiguity.
I was just on the policy part of the website, and I know we approved a lot of these policies already, the 000s, and none of them have been updated yet on the website.
Right, we decided a couple months ago that we would, when we got done the policies, we would give them the whole book to scan in so we didn't get confused.
Oh, so I think the policies, the individual ones, I thought that was only in terms of putting a complete book of policies online. I didn't think that. I thought we were still going to go forward. For example, we updated. I think that would be good.
We approve them as a board.
Yeah.
You just have to, right? I mean, we can't. It's not like you can't.
Because they are the new policies.
If we've done a second
Right,
reading
but didn't
as
we do
of
the
March.
O series?
Yeah, we did the 00. No, they're not up yet. I'm looking at the website right now.
Because I know Lori sent them. All right, I'll call them tomorrow.
Okay.
She did send the ones that what
That have already
Andrew's
been
saying is
approved.
right.
Yeah, all right.
The ones in process.
So they're just
no.
not through yet.
Yeah.
All right.
So if there are no questions, we can make that correction or that addition on homebound instruction. Does everyone understand what homebound instruction really is? It's really for when kids are sick and they have to be out of school for an extended period of time. There is a reimbursement factor that's tied into this. We get reimbursed for up to 5 hours a week for the cost of paying the homebound instructor that goes out and meets with these children in the home.
Oh, so there's
That's not written in. That's not in the book. Let's just say your son were to come down with mononucleosis. We get a script. We send out substitute Anne-Marie Trainer comes to your house. We can do up to a maximum of 5 hours a week of homebound. They come right to your home.
Gotcha.
That's why it's called that. Up to 5 hours a week, we pay that person for that. But then we submit that. We keep a record and we submit. And we get a kickback from the state for that.
They have to be out for a minimum of 4 weeks, before they are eligible. And
So you
if we
miss a
can
month of
find
school first.
somebody, we send them.
And then they start sending somebody out.
Pardon me?
Well, hopefully
So you miss a
parent-
month of school first, and then they start sending somebody out.
I wonder if you could, I don't want to mess with this policy, it's fine, but it's interesting that explanation you gave me. I wonder if with today's technology we can Skype these kids in or something.
I mean, I'm just thinking when I was young,
Sometimes they're
I
in
tore up my leg and I was
hospitals. I mean,
in a
there's-
hospital for 3 or 4 weeks, and then I was at home because I couldn't walk. And thank God my second grade teacher came and visited me in the hospital because I wouldn't have passed that year.
Yeah, these can go on ad just about forever. Like if you're really laid up for a long period of time, and it allows you to maintain, and then it allows you to maintain some continuity of instruction. And then there are special exceptions that you have for special education students. Because what will happen with it's illegal actually to do this for special needs students if you're trying to implement their IEP by keeping them in the home. That's actually called...
Yeah, you keep them in the class or whatever.
Well, it's called a violation of the least restrictive environment clause of IDEA. I could take an hour because I have lived this, but basically in IDEA you're saying you can't use that because what will happen, and this is, the dark side of society, some of these kids are difficult to deal with. And one way to keep them out of your hair is send them home. Sure, you know what, we'll send somebody home and we'll just take care of him at home. Federal law says, no, you're not going to do that.
How many students, just curiosity, how many students do per year on average use this policy?
There's no average. It's based on illness. I mean, so
Like, are we talking about maybe
we
5
probably have
kids,
statistics.
I don't need them. I just
You know what? I signed probably, I'm going to guess, 5 to 10 of these a quarter, maybe, a marking quarter.
I was going to say maybe 20 a year in a bad year.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say.
Just want to put it into
and sometimes
perspective.
we can't find people to send out.
Oh.
If, it has to be if they volunteer. We can't assign someone to go out.
And they get paid an hourly rate for
There's
that?
a contracted homebound instruction rate.
Okay.
If
Is it a
somebody,
substitute teacher? Is that who it is?
no, it doesn't have to be.
It
doesn't have to be.
Own staff first.
Our own
They're
staff,
certified.
our own staff may volunteer to do it, but then they get paid an
They have
extra.
to be certified in the content area.
Okay.
And then we go out to our substitute staff. And it's district-wide. We'll put out an email district-wide because if we need an elementary person and nobody in that child's building wants to do it, somebody might want to do it.
Mm-hmm.
So.
All right.
I did want to also note, just to give you, because these policies are kind of dry. If you don't understand why they're really here, it doesn't really make a whole lot of sense to you sometimes. Students who are also placed in mental health facilities or drug rehab or whatever, those institutions are allowed to bill us for up to 5 weeks of homebound instruction, but at our rate. And then we submit that to the state and also can get reimbursed for that because
Same thing, up to 5 hours?
Up to 5 hours a week, basically an hour a day.
5 weeks.
That's where they get the 5 hours a week. If it exceeds that, it's at their own cost, and we don't have to pay for it. And we are not obligated under the school code and homebound regulations to give more than 5 hours a week. We could, then we lose reimbursement.
Mm-hmm.
We won't get reimbursed for anything. That's why people stick to the 5 hour rule. So that's really a financial piece that's tied into this whole situation.
All right. Moving on to policy 114.
Actually, I just had a quick question.
All right.
Are we supposed to review 113, which is field trips?
Actually, 113 was already on.
Was it?
It was on the agenda. It's under a first reading already.
Yeah.
Were there any changes to that offhand? I don't recall.
No.
I forgot to bring that one down. That's already on, and that's why we skipped it. It's already on first
Sounds
reading.
familiar. Didn't we talk about that already?
I don't think it needed anything. I think we revised one part of it, I think.
Here's.
It's in a previous board. It's in this current board packet for you.
Yes, we did. We rewrote it because it was 1987, so that it was current. Because here's the crossed out section.
Yeah, can I see it just real quick?
The one that's on the internet or on the website doesn't have a revised.
Right, because we
We
haven't
didn't
put up
approve
there
it yet.
Ah.
You didn't vote it as a
Oh, I
second
thought
reading
you
as the
I
board.
have a set of things we've worked on over the
Okay.
year.
Yeah, this looks old. Looks like it was typed with a real typewriter.
1987, it would have been. Smith and Corona, remember that name? They're probably out of business now.
Okay, I'm good with that. Thank you.
Okay.
All right, sorry. 114.
114 is, again, just a review. If you remember, just recently, we, as of June 27th, 2011, so there are no recommended changes. This is in the review category.
What does page 2, line 6 says any extracurricular activity shall be considered to be under the sponsorship of this board when it's been approved by the superintendent and or his or her designee. What does sponsorship mean? I don't see that defined anywhere in here.
I'm going to just give my opinion as to what that means. It means it's under the board's jurisdiction.
I would think that we sponsor the clubs.
I mean,
It means they're not doing it without our objection is the way I would.
I just, because in some places it says, the board is responsible. The board shall do this. The board shall do that. Here it just says it's under the sponsorship of the board. And then I'm thinking to myself, well, what does that mean?
It is kind of vague language.
What does that mean that we're obligated to do? I mean, like, for example, lacrosse was, I would say, endorsed by this board, right? I mean, they play on our fields. They wear our jerseys. They get to compete in PIAA stuff. I think they even get letters, like a varsity letter for it. But we don't pay for it. We don't coach it. We don't pay for the coaches. We
They just use our name.
They just use it our name. Are we sponsoring it? Are we endorsing it? Like, I don't know what that means. So I guess I'm just looking at.
Where are you looking at that in?
This is on page 2, line
5.
6, 5, 6.
Under 3 authority.
Under 3 authority. Says.
That's not in the, I mean, I have the
I'm sorry.
revised one, it's not.
Maybe I'm not looking at the right one. I'm looking at the one I have from.
I'm looking at the one that was sent to us.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah, the one that was sent
it's
to us.
line 5. It says any extracurricular activity shall be considered.
These are the ones we copied out before we came down.
Oh, I see,
You see it?
yeah. Because I was looking on page 1, line 10, extracurricular activities are those programs that are sponsored or approved by the board but not offered for credit toward graduation.
Yeah, well, that's what I'm
says-
saying is, what does sponsored mean? I mean, I don't know what sponsored means. And I don't know whether we need to define that.
I
or
would,
just
you know
use a
what?
different word.
I would just take it out. Once you approve, really what the board does for activities is approve it. Sponsor looks like a superfluous word there.
Well, I guess, I don't know if it's necessarily bad. I'm just saying that we have this particular exception, or this case, which is lacrosse, which is the only one I can think of, where it's, and it may become more.
Well, tennis is the same way.
And tennis now is the same way, right?
Yeah.
So now we have 2 sports that we have endorsed or sponsored. I don't know what we've done with them. Approved them.
We allowed them to use our name.
Yeah.
I don't know what
sponsorship?
Yeah, exactly. I see what you're saying.
And if it's sponsorship, is that within our domain somehow? And we need to have some control and a policy?
The reason we did that for those organizations
I know
was
why we
that
did
the
it.
leagues wouldn't let them participate without being connected to a school district.
Exactly. And we didn't want to pay for it.
Right. And secondarily, we didn't want to fund it.
So I guess.
You use the word endorsed. We endorse the lacrosse.
Look, I just want to know, like, what I'm wondering is, does lacrosse and tennis, do they fall underneath this policy or don't they? And it's not clear to me whether they do or they don't.
The word sponsored is kind of spread out throughout this policy, so I think you have to address that word.
Yeah.
Taking it out means you're going to have to take it out in quite a few places. When it talks about co-curricular activities, it mentions activities that are sponsored by the board. Extracurricular activities, it talks about being sponsored by the board. So I think that has to be defined as opposed to taken out.
It doesn't even have to be it can be anything. It can be a club. Like, Relay for Life was sort of a club thing that got started. It happened on the school grounds, but we didn't really run it or, control it. But I think we sponsored it, didn't we? Or we endorsed it. I mean, we did something. We voted to allow it to happen.
Yeah, I wouldn't even consider Relay for Life under Policy 114. I think
it's an extracurricular, isn't it?
I think
it's just an activity
run
by a club.
It's an activity that's done by a club.
Okay.
I have another question. If, let's say, a group of students at the high school got together and said, we want to have a certain club, and it was approved by the administration, under this policy, and so let's say the advisor decided, I'll do it for free, I won't take any stipend. Does that have any? What would this policy do? Would that mean that it's under the board supervision, which ultimately it is because it's in a school building and it's run by the high school? But if there's no stipend being given, does that have an issue with one of our contracts? Or I'm just
No, if you have let me say I'm going to create a new club, sewing club, whatever it might be. So.
Yeah, and it could be just about anything,
Yeah,
as
so
long as it's
I'm
not
a teacher at the high
advocating
school,
destructive.
and I have a group of kids in home ec, and I want to do a sewing club, and I go to Bill, and I say, I have a list of kids who have signed a petition they would join this. Well, if you are going to get it for pay, it has to go to DBEA first.
Yeah.
Because it's not
you would
on
have
the list.
to adopt you would have to change the contract, right?
Right. So if I said, you know what, I just want to do it, I don't want to pay for it, then it could be approved at the board because it has to be under your insurance approval,
Okay.
But it could say at no cost to the district.
All right.
Where we got the gotcha happened so many times in the past, as it was explained to me, was something like that would happen. And then it got to the bargaining table, and the DBA would say, well, look, we got all these teachers that are doing these things, they need to be compensated for it. And it was like, oh, all right, well, now we'll include it. And then once you include it, you can't ever take it away, ever.
You can, but you have to bargain it.
You have to either bargain it or you got to eliminate the program altogether. You can't get rid of the advisor and put a volunteer. We've had several cases this year where teachers have said, "Well, look, I'm willing to do it for free."
But you
can't. No, we're going to pay you anyways. That doesn't mean they can't give it back to us, but.
To answer your question, there is a constitutional protection for any group that wants to meet on non-instructional time, and that's referred to in this.
Yes, that's
what's called the Equal Access Act.
I just wanted to make sure that wouldn't lead to any issue.
Well, no, but I just want to make that clear. That Equal Access Act is very, very. It's in here for a reason. It was a constitutional issue that was brought up many, many years ago. I think it's from the 1980s. With religious groups that wanted to meet in schools. And you can't basically deny them. As long as it's not school-endorsed speech. So the Equal Access Act is really...
gives them the opportunity to have their meetings.
It's really an extension of the First Amendment right under the Constitution to have the right... You can't control, quote, the speech or the content of any group that wants to meet on school property as long as... it's not interfering with instructional time or it's officially endorsed by the school. So if you want to have a Bible reading club at Daniel Boone High School and it starts at 2:35 and we end the day at 2:34, they have the right to be there.
Now, what if you can't find...
We have one right now.
We do?
Yeah.
Okay.
Christian Athletes.
Yeah.
Well, it's the Fellowship of Christian Students. It's not athletes.
It used to be the
flag,
the people at the flagpole years ago, but... And
now,
there is an advisor who volunteers that. This is static volunteers. Not paid.
I'm curious if, let's say a student did want to start up a religious or a political club, but no teacher is willing to sponsor it. How would that work?
It might fall under our jurisdiction in terms of saying, look, we're not going to have students unsupervised. So we need some responsible adult to take over that doesn't really... It's not infringing on the group's rights. It's the district's right to maintain a safe environment and not have the facility open. Because we're not just going to let anybody come in off the street and use a room in our building if we don't know who they are and aren't. You know what I'm saying? So that's beyond the scope of this policy.
All right. Now, looking at the policy, I just read... non-instructional time is the time set aside by the school before actual classroom instruction begins or after actual classroom instruction ends. Would that include homeroom? For example, if I wanted to have a club that met after the first bell rang.
There have been case laws, and I think most of the case on the laws on this, homeroom is instructional time, even though it's not.
Because I filed for homeroom.
Even though homeroom's not. Quote.
Well, I actually was looking into this a while ago, and the Channel 1 program they watch at the high school, that has advertising in it, and you cannot include, I think this is for Pennsylvania, because I was big into this a while ago, you cannot include advertising time watching advertisements as instructional time.
Right.
Is that subtracted?
7:45.
Okay.
So that gives it 10 minutes to play.
All right.
Right. But you couldn't have a club. I mean, there's not enough time to have a club meeting.
But you need to remember what the sellout was, because I was not really big on Channel 1 either, was that we all got free TVs.
Yeah.
And I didn't think that was, but everybody went for it back in the day, so that's how a lot of schools got 300 TVs to have in their classroom by selling out to Channel 1 so that they could advertise in the schools.
At some point, I think I'd like to discuss that as a board. It's not for this committee, I know, but maybe curriculum instruction, because we don't use those TVs at the high school other than for morning announcements. And we're getting rid of a large portion of our school day, 10 minutes a day, for a program that it's not for this committee to talk about, but I'd like to talk about it at some point. So
we'll put it on the agenda.
Yeah,
all right.
We'll
get it up under new business.
I like that. Thank you. Let's do that at our next committee of the whole.
I guess, so the only thing I'm still sort of stuck on here is, one, I think we need to address this word sponsored. Because if you read the definition of extracurricular activities, it doesn't preclude things like lacrosse or tennis or any other club that somebody wants to start.
Right.
It includes those things. So I guess I want to know, what is our role? What are the duties and responsibilities of the board to an organization like that? And I could see somebody playing lacrosse right now coming back and saying, well, wait a minute, you've endorsed us, you sponsor us. Now, following your policy, you have to provide X, Y, and Z for us, even though we approved them under the condition that we wouldn't. Because then you go into the guidelines, ensuring that the program has, of extracurricular, are you involving, Are we making sure we're guarding against the exploitation of the students if it's lacrosse? Are we providing that the continuing evaluation of the program as components? Are we ensuring that the activities are open to all students? I don't think we do any of that stuff for those two things. So
I would say we do them. I don't know that it's as explicit as you might.
Remember there was an issue that came up with the lacrosse team. A coach did something. I mean, I remember getting a bunch of emails about it, and the athletics sort of got involved and solved the problem because it was really under their domain, and so we didn't really have to step into that. But I just think this is a little too gray.
So Andrew,
yeah.
What about this? If you were talking lacrosse or tennis, we could say the board endorses those. And in this policy, take out sponsor, so it would just be approved by the board. You wouldn't approve lacrosse, you're endorsing it. So that differentiates.
Or you could sponsor lacrosse, but you're not approving it. I mean, I think you got to do one or the other. You got to take one word out.
Well, no,
it has to come out of here, or it's got to be approved.
I think it's semantics, but I think whatever. No, wait a minute. But whatever word you use to say what you were saying earlier, then you define what that means.
I think you need to, look.
If we use endorse or sponsor, you can make them both sound the same, but you need to define them.
But we don't even know what it means now.
No. But we would have the latitude to say, for our purposes of our policy, endorsement means. And then we say blah 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 blah. Then it becomes the policy. So
right.
it removes the ambiguity.
I mean, I've sat down with plenty of attorneys who you're reading ordinances and stuff like that, and there's words in there. And they say, "Well, let's look at the definitions."
Exactly.
Go to the definitions. Well, it doesn't say what it is in the definitions,
right.
Or the definitions are vague. And
then
so
it becomes made up. Then you make something up.
Some other standard, and the next thing you know, somebody else is dictating to you what that word means.
Right.
And so I'm a little concerned with that. The other thing I have in here was I noticed under co-curricular, this says any extracurricular activity shall be considered to be under the sponsorship of this board when it has been approved by the superintendent and or his designated. This is page 2, line 6
right.
Again. I guess the question is, shouldn't there be some sort of board approval in there too? I mean, does somebody just come to the superintendent and say, look, we want to do X, Y, and Z, and you say, sure, go ahead, and now at some point...
Yeah, I was actually thinking the same thing. I said, that looks like I can approve.
In the past,
it looks like I can approve something, and then you go, okay. That's not usually...
I think we should just take the sentence out.
I mean, in the past, the board's always... past practice has been we've been approving these things that didn't come along, but this doesn't say we have to. This says the superintendent can put in place 18 clubs and 18 advisors, and then all of a sudden, we're sitting down at the bargaining table, and it comes to our attention, hey, look, we got 18 teachers that are acting in this capacity as coaches.
I honestly think removal of that sentence, just like Anne Marie just suggested, does absolutely nothing to the policy and protects us more. You just delete it. It really does seem to be...
We've never done anything
it does seem,
come through the board because it's a financial...
It does seem to be a superfluous sentence. I'm not sure when we did it the first time in 2011 why that issue didn't come up.
And then at the last page...
So we're going to delete that if there's no objection to that.
On page 3... Lines 1 and 2 says the superintendent designee shall establish the length of sessions, numbers per week, and other limitations deemed reasonably necessary. And this, I think, pertains to equal access. I don't know, I'm assuming, because it's under that subsection. And I read that and I thought, well, this sort of gets to the heart of the issue of what we just talked about the other night.
Yeah.
And somewhere in here we need to have a paragraph that says the board shall determine the number of meetings, length of time, frequency, start and end dates of all extracurricular activities within the school district and shall have final say and approval, blah, 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 on what the definition of a season is. I think this is the perfect place to define that in the policies. And then you don't have to go through every single activity and say, well, this one's going to start on this date and this one's going to start on that. This is a blanket statement, addresses all extracurricular and co-curricular activities, what their seasons are, how many times they meet, how long they meet each time. It's completely within the board domain. Yeah. And I think the other caveat we have to have in here, and I think I remember it somewhere in our other policies, was something to the effect of the board retains is the be-all, end-all, final arbiter in determining this. And if a coach or a volunteer or an employee does something contrary to that, those actions are null and void automatically. Or they have to be, if there's a contract assigned, so all collective bargaining agreements and employment contracts must reflect this authority and follow the policies and guidelines of the school district or this particular policy. And if they don't, then that portion of that contract is deemed null and void.
We could say this policy supersedes any such actions.
Agreements, actions, agreements.
I mean, I think there has to be that caveat on there, because what I don't want to do is get in a situation where a club or an activity is created, and then now later there's a financial obligation that we've now entwined ourselves in due to past practice or some other legal thing. We need to have a legal clause in here that basically makes the obligation on the contract to reflect the policy, and not vice versa.
I would actually recommend, because I think the language that you're referring to under Equal Access Act should not be touched. I think we should then add another.
That's what I'm saying.
We should add another line under guideline, an underlined section that says definition of activity seasons.
I think even if you get up here and you're under definitions, right under co-curriculars, you can say, the definition is, and you just put it in there somewhere. I mean, the board is going to determine now what, or maybe it's got to be under.
No, actually, I wouldn't say the board is going to determine. We should define it.
Or approve it, right?
We should define it. We should say what it is.
We should say what the...
I think we should explicitly say, in other words, because Connor brought up a good point, what about chess club? And now is the chess club season over now because they're not having any more competitive matches?
We don't have to define it. We could just say we need to
we reserve the right.
It.
Yeah.
So they can say, well, we want it to be one night, and we can say, no, we're not going to approve that. So we can still define it by saying no, but ultimately I think we need to approve it. Defining it's not...
You're going to go crazy.
It's good enough. It has to be approved. It's got to be...
When it comes close to a competition and they want to meet 3 times a week and next year...
That's why I'm saying I don't want to define it. I just want to approve it. I want them to come to us with a list and say, we want our schedule to start here, end here, and we're probably going to meet all these times in between. Okay, I approve
all
that.
All clubs are
year-long. I don't want to define it.
Well, that's my point is, yes and no, right? I mean, you say all clubs are year-long, but we're talking about extracurricular activities, which are clubs, but it's also sports and other things.
I'm going back to your thing about the chess club. They meet even when they're not competing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Is that part of their season?
And that was my point at the board meeting, is that should just be part of the job, the description for the advisor is that, that it's a year-long club, blah, 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 blah. And that's where you could do all because the chorus, the chess club, the history club.
How about if we say something more along the lines of the...
Jazz band's co-curricular.
I'm just saying...
No, but I'm talking about
when
the
it's
club.
Co-curricular, it's an athletic event. Athletics and clubs are extracurriculars, so we can't differentiate. All extracurriculars, all co-curriculars, my point is the power of determining how often these things meet, what the length of the season is, how many hours, the duration of a particular meeting. I don't want the board making those decisions like, hey, look, this is how long football should meet, blah, blah, blah. But we certainly should be the one determining what the length of the entire season is. And if that, and quite frankly, what I don't want happening is what we had happening with the band, which is a faculty member says, well, I'm just not going to do it anymore after this date, right? I'm deciding as a faculty member when the kids are going to meet, when they're not going to meet, how much my salary is going to be for whether I'm going to meet 15 times or I'm going to meet 5. I'm going to determine that, right? And that's exactly what happened in that particular case. And it shouldn't be up to him or her. It should be up to the board to say, look, you're meeting from here to here, and it's in the policy, period. Extracurriculars, the season, it's defined by us. We control it. We approve it. We control it. We can change it at our whim. We can come back and say, well, no, it's not this anymore. It's this. And there shouldn't be any financial consequence to that as a result. We should reserve that right to ourselves at all times. If it means you're going to meet 17 times, from September to December as opposed to 6, you meet 17 times this year. Maybe next year it's 15. But your salary shouldn't be doing this every time we meet.
Well, it hasn't.
Well,
that was a suggestion.
I think you're just talking about athletics and the band. Clubs don't vary.
Well, what if we got a club, for example, I'll use the club I'm involved in, Academic Challenge. We go to competitions from the months of September to February. In the past, we've continued to practice with our advisor up until June. What if our advisor were to come back and say, listen, our season, I guess, is only from September to February, but we practice all year. And the board would reserve the right to say the season lasts from August to June, correct? That should be under the jurisdiction of
say
the
all
board.
clubs are year long.
For that, for clubs, I guess that would work.
The thing that we care most about is the length of the season and the attendance of special events. Isn't that what we really care about as a board? I care about
the athletic seasons and the band seasons.
No, but you can't differ in terms of our policy. I hear what you're saying, but in terms of our policy doesn't say, well, we're going to do athletics this way, band this way, clubs this way. Our policy says extracurriculars, right? Mm-hmm. So we got to treat all extracurriculars the same, whether it's band, football, chess club, whatever. Right. We got to treat them all uniformly.
And what do you care about for all of those?
What do I care about? I care
the length of the season.
No. I care that at the end of the day, the power of making that determination, it always rests with the board.
I get you, but specifically of what determination? Because I keep going back to what I care about is just how long the season is and the events that they attend.
It's not even I think, the length. I think it's also frequency. Because we've had that discussion at the board level where a board member said, well, wait a minute, football's, pick a number, it's 8 games, right?
It's 10 games a year.
10 games a year.
Plus playoffs.
Well, what happens if something changes? Now it's 14 games a year, or it's basketball. Basketball's got more games, right? So now it's 14, you double the number of games, and suddenly somebody says, collective bargaining agreement comes up and says, wait a minute, now we're coaching twice as much, working twice as hard, we need to be paid twice as much. And then we get in this discussion about, oh, well, yeah, maybe they need to be paid twice as much, and how much are they getting paid per game? And we get so far afield, and I just want something that's clear and simple in a policy that says, look, it doesn't matter how many times you meet, how long, whether you practice for an hour, you practice for 6 hours every day. It doesn't matter if you meet, from September till June or September till December. That's it. That's whatever we make it, and we can say this year it's this, next year it's X minus 1 or X minus 6.
Isn't that a compensation discussion versus a policy discussion, though?
It is, but what happens
is seasons.
What happens, at least what's been told to me from Margaret was, when we got into the whole activity fee thing, what I found was, she said, look, what happens is we've gotten into this issue where certain decisions were made to start something, right? And then there's been a lot of
backdooring.
There's been a lot of autonomy, right, with a football coach or band somebody or whoever, and they take things in certain directions. And all of a sudden, everybody, years go by, and now it's
an entitlement. It's
an entitlement, or they've now determined what is going to be what, and then anything above and beyond that becomes an extra. And the board, we turn over. We don't know. I mean, we step on. You're like, wait a minute, you've been doing this for 16 years? Okay, well, that makes sense. You need to be paid more. And all of a sudden, now it's a collective bargaining issue, right? And then when you never take it back, and there's nothing that speaks to it in the policy. So I know when we do contracts, whatever our governing documents are for a community or anything else, any contract, whether it's an agreement of sale, it's a lease, it's anything, if it does not adhere to the governing documents of that community that we create, it is automatically null and void. So if we ever have to go to court over something, the judge looks at it and says, wait a minute, you who struck up this agreement of sale, you who created this lease or this contract, did you refer to the governing documents? Oh, you didn't? Oh, well, you're null and void. You're out of here. You have no legal standing. The governing documents govern, they rule. Anything else is gone. And so collective bargaining agreement issue that comes up later on, you can always go back and wait a minute, that's in direct violation of our policy and procedures. We say we control what the season is, how many times somebody meets or doesn't meet, how long the practices are or aren't. I mean, if Justin McAdams wants to have band practice for 4 hours, and we as a board say, no way, that's ridiculous. That's should be an hour at the most.
Well,
that's our power,
do we have
right?
a
Not his.
file somewhere that has all the activities written down with the advisor,
yes,
and how much they think they need? Do we have a file?
No, I never asked them how much. At the end of the year, there's a report they send to me about all their activities.
And there's a job description for each advisor as well.
I don't want an activity to be kind of shot down because they think they have to come to us for them to meet more often than what they already do. I mean,
no, I agree with you. I agree with that point.
How do you avoid that?
You don't want to micromanage it, is what you're saying.
Well, I think what you say is that power rests. Our superintendent has to manage that, but ultimately the ultimate approval always resides with the board. Yeah. And whether we decide to act or not act is at our discretion. But at the end of the day, if we ever want to step in a year later, 2 years later, and say, well, wait a minute.
Like this American Legion.
We have the power to do that, right? Because we can look at our policy and say, wait a minute, it always says here that power always vests with the board.
Right.
And we can step in at any time and change things.
I don't disagree with your what you want to happen.
Yeah.
I support that.
I don't want to be in the administrative.
Misinterpreted that, there's a group of kids who say, hey, let's meet tomorrow to keep going with this thing, and someone tells them, sorry guys, you can't, you need the board to approve that.
Yeah, I agree with that.
I want to avoid that.
Well,
from happening.
if I think, and maybe I'm wrong, but the core of what you want to be able to ultimately control, tied to finance, is the defined beginning and the end of a season.
I don't even think it's defined to finance because, for example...
Well, it is because it becomes an extra pay for someone.
It does, but at the end of the day also, like this issue with marching at the parade, I don't think it's really a financial issue. It is an issue of somebody just unilaterally decided that they weren't going to do it.
No, but where I was going was, if what you're defining, take band out of it for a second, football. I'll use PIAA that has something about all regular season games have to end, I don't know it off the top of my head, but I know they have a date. Let's say November 1st. It's not, but after that it's considered extended season. Everything has to finish by Thanksgiving, and then basketball can start on a certain day and so on. So if you had a start date of whatever you want, August 1st if they're doing practices, stay away from once a week, twice a week, 4 hours, 2 times, blah, 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 no Saturdays. The beginning and the end. And then it falls into the extended season, which is defined, again, by PIAA.
Right, because
then you would control when they think it's called extended season. When you get to band, if band could just be... it's all year.
Well, band, and then you got marching band.
Right. Well, no,
right?
we mean marching band.
No, there's 2 bands that are extracurricular. There's marching band and jazz band. Jazz band has a more defined season, but if you just left that, let's say, like Connor said, they meet more frequently at a certain time of the year. Let's say we have a special event here in the district. Let's say you're opening another building. And you might want the jazz band to play in June. Their season,
quote, ended in February.
April. No different than this marching situation this time. If the season was year-long for them, then the expectation is, if something like this comes up, you're marching. It's part of the deal when you sign on to it.
But what I want to avoid, I think, is where Frank's going. Well, Frank brings up a different take on it. I don't want to be in a position as a board where and which was almost suggested the other night, right? Which was, let's get the list of all of our activities, how often are they meeting, and we're going to now define what those seasons are according to current practice. Well, that stuff changes. It can change
That's
every
overkill.
year, right? And I think that you design a policy, it's supposed to be governing for not only activities you currently have, but ones that haven't even been thought up yet. They're for activities that have gone away and may come back. They're designed for activities that, for eons. I mean, for 10 years this policy has to govern whatever may be coming. And so I kind of look at it and say, we just need something broad that says, it doesn't have to be a big, just in 3 lines. The board shall have all power to determine.
Well, I would say it this way, the board reserves the right to, and then finish that sentence.
Well, I think the issue is like one of, okay, well, you do have special events. Maybe we've decided that, hey, you know what, it'd be nice if the band participated in the Christmas parade. They never have. We're getting a lot of calls from the community. They want us to do it. They should do it. I don't want a band director coming to me and saying, well, that's not part of my contract. Okay, that hasn't been past practice. That's not what our quote-unquote season is. You're adding extra work for me. Blah, blah. Now we have a collective bargaining issue or some other. I want a policy that says we can add whatever we want to your season and we can take it out. If we decide, look, it's getting too expensive or it's too much workload on the students to be doing basketball practice 5 nights a week, plus games 2 days on every weekend, and tournaments and stuff like that. We as a board want to step in and say that coach has gone too far. You're only going to have practices 3 times a week and 1 game on a weekend. And we need to have the authority to do that. You know what I'm saying? And I don't want somebody else defining to me what, as a board, what that season. I just want to reserve that right that the board always has the option of stepping in. Do we have to? No. Do we want to? No. But I think we ought to be able to have that power.
Maybe you worded something to this effect. The board reserves the right to authorize the superintendent to blah, 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 and we fill in. I don't know that wording yet.
Well, I mean, I think we just need to express this to maybe Subers. He can come up with language that
Yeah, I have something I just wrote down. Is this what we're going for? I'm not saying put this into policy. I just want to know if this is the direction we're going.
It's a brainstorm.
Yeah.
So
The board reserves the right to establish, determine, and adjust the length of extracurricular and co-curricular seasons, practices, meetings, etc. Is that something we're going for? Events. Yeah.
But where is the original list that you have the right to change going to show up for every club and every sport?
You mean the original list?
Like, I'm the chess club.
I don't think we need to approve the original list. We need to just, I think you're on the right track there.
But who defines it if the board says we have the right to change it? What are we changing?
Well, it could be
if isn't
current
written
practice,
somewhere?
and then if there's an issue, it comes up to the board, and the board
Well, I
would
think
have that.
We
Yeah.
reserve the right to define, change, edit, add to, subtract from any number of the frequency, the activity. We always reserve that right. Do we have to exercise it? No, but we always reserve it. So the coach can come up with whatever his seasons and
We
practices
reserve the
are.
right to either do that or delegate that.
Yeah, to the
But, all right,
superintendent or
but
somebody
now
else.
I'm going back as I'm the new marching band director.
Yeah.
Just
Where
playing
do I
devil's
go to
advocate here.
find it?
Well,
Is it
you as a
my
new
job
marching
description?
No. You as a new marching band director could come forward and say, "Hey, look, I want as a new marching band director, I think these are things we should participate in. We're going to do every football game. We're going to do 2 parades and these competitions." And you submit it to whoever our designee is for approval, or the superintendent, or the athletic director, or whoever it is that monitors that, the high school principal. I don't know.
probably the high
Okay?
school principal.
And the high school principal looks at it. But then it shouldn't end there, right? Like, at the end of the day, if the community says, wait a minute, you forgot the
American
Memorial
Legion.
Day parade for
Yep.
crying out loud.
Yep.
That's so important to us. Well, when we have the right to come in and say, well, look, yeah, that's now part of it. That's
No,
now
and
part
I
of it.
don't. I'm thinking logistically in terms of all the clubs and all the activities.
They're going to
Are
determine
you
their own. They're going to determine their own schedules, and they're going to determine their own frequency of practices and meetings and all that kind of
Because
stuff.
we are delegating that to them.
Yeah, we're going to delegate
But
that
we
to
reserve
them.
the right to refine those.
We reserve
But how do
Yeah.
we know what they're
To-
defining
would-
unless we're expecting a document each year that says it's going to run year long? Or how do we?
I understand what she's saying. You don't want to get hit with.
You told me I could do it unless you said otherwise, and I defined it as 2 months. And it's only after the fact instead of, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, all right. Well, then maybe what we need to do is
It's reactive rather than proactive.
they need to submit, every club needs or activity needs to submit a schedule of event. I mean, don't we approve schedules, sports schedules, and club schedules and all that kind of stuff?
Needs to be submitted to the board or the designee, and we are designating that to.
The administrator. Who does
I
it
mean-
now?
Well, what
I don't think we really
I
don't.
do the end of year report. That's where I'm getting
That's
at.
what
Like
I-
right
that's
now,
what
is
I-
that something you want me to take on?
Shouldn't that
when,
be a beginning of the year process?
Well, it would have to be now,
Yeah.
yes.
Well-
So is it when I say I'm interested in being the academic challenge advisor, then there's some form that I want to fill in to say if I'm approved, here's my plan for the year.
I think that's important. I would think that if you're going to run a club or you're going to start something, you should have a plan of how often you're going to meet, what your
Special
schedule
events.
is going to
That's
be.
what I
I think-
wanted to know if you had a file, so that if, say, the new
Special
band
events
director would
listed.
say what.
I think
what
the
if-
special
What
events
at
should
the
be
end of
listed.
the year report?
Yeah,
Yeah, but see, at the end of the
But
year,
see, that's where I'm.
that's the
Well,
issue,
if
though.
they
That's
look at the end of the year and then they go to plan the next year, can't they use some of that information
Well,
from the end of many
Sure, but I
years?
haven't seen it. I haven't seen your plan. That's what I'm saying
that's
to
what I'm saying.
Andrew.
It should
But
happen
what
at the beginning
about
of the year.
last year? There was a plan last year in place. Can they look at?
Well, let me suggest this then. What's one more piece of paper? When I file grants with the Pottstown Wellness Foundation, they ask me what is my proposed activities, my proposed membership, blah blah. But all those couple of general questions. If I took the end of the year report and a couple of appropriate questions, what proposed activities do you have for the year, blah blah blah. One pager, you send it out. Then the end of the year report says, of what you proposed, what did you do? What else did you do in addition to it? At least at the beginning of the year, which Bill would start approving first and then it comes to me. At least then I know, hey, this academic challenge person already said to me, January to April, baby, that's all I'm doing. And I can then go back and say, no, not if you want to run this club.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's important. That's
where
by
I
defining
see
it
what's
in the
missing.
beginning.
Yeah.
By defining in the beginning, everybody's expectations are the same, right? And the issue I think we always have is we're finding out at the end
Right.
what happened, and then everybody's expectations are wrong. We expected this, we got something else, and that person who was doing it expected to do this, and we expected something so much larger from them. I don't know how you do this. I don't know how.
No,
somebody says-
I think I know how you do it. You have
No. I'm talking about how you do it now, where somebody says, "Well, look, I'm gonna run a club, but I don't know how often we're gonna meet. I don't know what we're gonna do. I don't know." How do you do that?
Yeah, I just want to say, I mean, what if you have an advisor come in, he's approved, he gets $3,000 a year, and he determines, let's say I want to run, I'm going to use chess club again. I want to run chess club, I only want to meet once per year. He has that right now, doesn't he? We have an issue with it, we don't like that, but if this is how, but that's pretty much what's going on.
There's no checks and balances there.
Additionally, setting in a schedule at the beginning of the year, that could run into issues like, let's say, I'm going to go back to Academic Challenge. We scheduled a fundraiser. The students, we wanted to do a fundraiser to raise money for next year, and we determined that a few months ago. That wouldn't have been submitted at the beginning of the year. So if we do go
you can add to it.
that I want to make sure.
Yeah, that doesn't. I don't think that's.
Like, I don't want
we're
that
not
to
in that
become a
realm.
limiting
They don't
factor.
come with a presentation to you or someone that here's the activity I would like to do. Here's my goal. Here's my plan. Here's what we're doing November, December, January, February, March, April. Like they
can't plan that far. I mean, they don't even know who their kids are in their club before they get approved.
Some of the clubs are.
They kind of have an idea of what they're planning.
They could have an idea, but I don't.
But they couldn't do it by month.
I don't think you want to. I don't think you want to get your club's plan to the level that a teacher plans a course.
Yeah, I think you
want to be careful with that.
I look at Mr. Basil was saying.
When I do a strategic plan for something I'm going to do, that I have an actual written out plan, and then I have a check of did I accomplish that. So if they're wanting to,
I mean, it would to take on micromanaging all these clubs.
No, I don't think you need to do that.
No,
I think it's
wondering
just
how they come to you. We hear about it at the end, but when they first come, do they even have any idea of how many students?
They don't come to me. Or the building principals will recommend somebody who they've interviewed and have a conversation with.
I don't think you want to get your hands in knowing what 30 different clubs are doing.
Yeah, I don't think we do
I'm just
either.
trying to
But
figure out how it goes with.
I mean, if you want to do that, we could certainly make it happen. I don't think.
I
we
have
want
an end
is-
of the year report.
All I want to
They
do.
have to attach all their minutes, which is an auditor's requirement, their revenue and their expenses, and that's all filed in the business office. So it's signed off on by the principal, then it's signed off by me, and then it goes to Danielle. Right
See, because
now.
there's financial
Because it's never been
implications
an
for these
issue.
groups too.
To challenge a chess club guy.
Here's
or
the thing.
whoever.
Anybody who's you have a going concern right now, you got 30 going concerns, whether it's athletics or extracurriculars, whatever they are. We have programs that are in place. People have been doing it for years. They obviously know sort of what the routine is going to be for next year, right? So they kind of know, the drama club knows they're going to put on, I don't know,
play.
a play or two plays, one in the fall, one in the spring.
Right.
It's going to require this number of rehearsals. They know this in advance. So when the kids decide they're going to sign up, there should be some sort of discussion with
Like
kids.
a syllabus.
That too, yeah.
You're expected to show up to these practices. They're going to happen on these nights, and we're going to have to play on this date, dress rehearsal on this date, so on and so forth. And
Well, actually, now that they're paying for those, they ought to know what they're getting for their money.
well, I'm just saying, like,
Well-
it doesn't. Everybody has to have some sort of loose schedule. We as a board have a loose schedule. It doesn't mean we don't add meetings, we don't change things, but we all have an expectation of what they're going to be. And I think that's all that really needs to be required up front, because I think that'll go a long way to avoiding some of the issues we've had recently where people have arbitrarily decided they're not going to do things just because that's what they don't want to do, or
Too much discretion vested in one
Well,
person.
yeah.
and I can only say, I mean, I think we're talking about one person here. We don't have a problem with clubs. These advisors of anything, we're not talking big money that these people walk away with for a full year. And I've never had a person that has a parent, a student come to me, or a principal saying, our folks haven't done. I mean, I'm not saying they shouldn't. I think there's a person in question who is
it only takes one bad apple, right?
You're right.
And then now
You're
you have to address that issue. I mean, we have this thing with the TSA where these kids out of their mind are going someplace. You know, it's my.
Well, we need to address that in policy
well, look,
too.
Here's the thing. Like we said, I mean, came up. Kevin said, "Well, look, is that extra? Is it not extra?" And then we all said, "Well, no, that's part of the fee. I mean, that's part of the stipend. Right. That person agreed to do this. That just because they're going somewhere else, good for them. But that person doesn't get paid extra.
Right.
But the fact that the question even came up, right, it should never have come up. It should have just been expected. Now we have to address it in a policy, saying, look, this is part of the season. And I think the problem we did with athletics was when we abdicated our responsibility in a policy to PIAA, and they said, well, this is the definition of a regular season, this is the definition of extended season. Now, whenever our kids go into extended seasons, it costs us. Because now our contract now reflects the policy, and the contract says anything beyond this point is considered extra and you got to pay more. Now we got to budget, or we can't budget for whether kids do well or don't do well, because, you know what I mean? What if every season all of our kids are doing well and they're all in extra, an extended season?
There's a potential that every team could go to the state championship.
And now you got a budgetary issue that you're dealing with that you didn't expect. So I guess I'm just saying I didn't want to get this far into the weeds. I guess I was just saying I just think it's an opportunity in this particular policy to sort of lay down what powers are always vested in the board, and that we have the option of changing things at will, and that our contracts will always reflect that flexibility, and if they don't, those portions of those contracts will be null and void. And we can designate to our superintendent, to our athletic director, to our assistant superintendent to manage that however you see fit. But at the end of the day, if we find there's a problem, we always have to have the ability to reach in and change things, and not have to suffer some sort of have our hands tied because of a collective bargaining arrangement that arose sometime later, or there was some sort of miscommunication as to what the expectations of something were.
So,
for me to implement something like this, I would be more comfortable with every organization handing to me like a mini syllabus that says this is kind of what I'm going to do.
If that's what the administration wants to do,
and then I would say to you, here's the packet of them for your review. I endorse these. Do you have a problem with them? And then that's the end of it. Then we keep them on file. Because I'm envisioning marching band syllabus to say football games, this parade. That I would want
these competitions.
I would want explicit listing, but it doesn't lock them in case they want to do something extra. But I want at least a minimum listing of what they expect to be at. And if I say, knowing what happened this year, I'm just going to use the band. If I don't see the American Legion parade on there, it's not getting my approval.
I think there was a time where the marching band had competitions that were in conflict with tests or exams or something. And so I think at some point in time, somebody ought to be able to sort of review that and say, wait a minute, these kids are going to be up until 3 o'clock in the morning the night before. They're taking exams. That doesn't make sense. Maybe you shouldn't be going to that particular.
We were even told in the band that band was our first priority. Test and homework. If you had homework, that wasn't a legitimate reason not to come to band. You were expected to be there even if you had a huge test the next day.
I'm just thinking in terms of scheduling conflicts. I know when I was in high school, you typically knew when you had your mid-years and your finals. You knew when you're going to have certain tests.
Yeah, I don't want to.
I think it's good.
I don't want to vilify the band program. That's not my point.
It could be anything.
Yeah.
All I don't want you to have to worry about as a board is dotting all the I's and crossing all the T's. I think it's beyond your scope. I mean, if I come to you and say, okay, if the football team says, look, or for athletics, I think we say PIAA will govern their seasons. For athletics, I think it's okay to say that, because if you're going to tell kids that the board has a discretion to just end your season when you get to the end of the regular season, why would they strive to be better? You don't want to get into that level. I don't think.
Would it be possible? I don't want to interrupt you, but would it be all right if, let's say, the team did go on to states, and we didn't want to have to pay that coach the extra money? Could we, as a board, say your season is from the beginning of the year to the end of the year, and you're getting paid your stipend for that?
No, because right now you have a contractual obligation if they get into postseason that they get
collective bargaining agreement,
because it reflects the PIAA, right, in the collective bargaining agreement.
No, it doesn't affect it. They call it extended season, whether it was PIAA or we joined another league or we were.
What if we just say that our season goes all year? It doesn't have an extended season.
Well, you would have to do that. What you would have to do is when you open up the contract with the teachers to say, we are now establishing one stipend. If you go from September to Thanksgiving, that's what it is. If your season runs all the way to almost Christmas and you win the state championship, you're still not getting any more money. That's the way it was when I coached.
If that was in our policy, would that be grandfathered into the new contract when it comes up for negotiation? Because the contract doesn't
No,
rate
you
over
would
the policy.
you have to negotiate that
out.
I coached wrestling in Boyertown for 12 years, and many times we took kids all the way to the last week of the season. The last PIAA event was the state championship. I sat on that floor up at Hershey Park Arena. I didn't get any extra pay because the Boyertown contract is where I taught at the time didn't have a provision for that.
So it's just a contractual issue.
Well, no, I was obligated to be there.
Yeah.
And then I would get my pay at the end of the season whenever they would pay me. But our contract is structured differently. In Daniel Boone, you submit a voucher for how many times you showed up at an extended season event, and you get paid for it. We have no way of not doing that right now because of the contract.
Now, I want to go back
So
to
you can't even put that in the policy. You have to just make sure that when you negotiate your next contract and you deal with coaches' compensation in that contract, that it reflects what you want as a board with them.
All right, I want to go back to the list idea of having the advisor submit a list in advance of the events they'd like to attend. I think that list should be made available to the students as well, so they know what they're getting involved in.
Well,
If we do go
here's
forward with
something I
that.
think then you have to think about is I don't think you're going to approve somebody as an advisor before you even know what their plan is.
Mm-hmm.
And then what if you don't like their plan or their idea? Now you've already approved the person.
Well, they don't get to implement. They don't get to
Well, how
implement
do
their
you- how's
plan.
it
Yeah.
We give you the list of all the people that the building principal
Right.
who directly is responsible for that club approves as their choice. And you'll see that in June.
And it's their discretion on what they attend. And so it's that you're approving that personnel in advance without knowing what they're going
Right,
to do,
because
right?
we've never
So
asked
it's the
for the
same
document
issue.
we're
It's
talking about. But if you're saying, what if I only want to go to I want to go to 3 events with, I keep saying, the academic challenge. Somebody gets your piece of paper and says, no, these kids work really hard, they should go to 6 events. And the advisor disagrees, they're already been approved.
I think if it's an existing club, a new club we'll have to talk about, but let's start with an existing club. Let's say it's, don't mean to use the example again, but let's say it's marching band because we're looking for a marching band director. I think the administration, because it's an existing club and there's history there, like Monica was saying, when you interview that person who wants to do that activity, we say, well, here's what we expect you to do. You can refine this, but here's what you're doing.
I think you should have a set of minimum expectations.
Yeah, before they're approved, you're going to have to sign up for this.
But go to a regular person that's annually approved.
Okay.
I've been the academic challenge person for 10 years, let's say.
Mm-hmm.
I'm almost thinking that if you want something submitted as their proposal, that should be what happens before an approval and push that approval process back to August.
Yeah.
I mean, we don't have to approve anybody in June or July. I mean, what are they
You know
going
what
to
I'm
do for 2
saying?
months?
I mean, because maybe you really disagree with the philosophy of what they want to do, but you never had them put it on paper.
Yeah.
Hey,
And how are they going to do a syllabus and get started and then share that with you?
And when I say a syllabus, I mean a one-pager.
But whatever it is, they've now showed that to the kids.
And they know what they're getting involved in.
And then you say, oh, no. When it comes into us in August and September, and it's already started.
Well, when they meet with the principal, shouldn't they have something to submit to the principal?
Well, that's what I'm saying, that before you see them to approve them as an advisor, I'm almost thinking they have to give you their not necessarily you, give the principal their game plan. Then he says, yeah, I want you as the academic challenge advisor.
Yeah, that would make more sense.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I mean, it doesn't have to be the board. I mean, I think that's what we're all
No, I don't
saying.
think it should be.
No,
It needs to be the building principal, the athletic director. It could be the superintendent.
We need to oversee that.
You guys delegate whose responsibility is, for those people in your domain. Maybe it's the department head. If it's like the math club, maybe it's the department head of the math club or the principal is looking over
Just
and saying,
somebody,
well, hey, look, these are the things we're going to do. But I agree with Frank.
What the policy needs to do is state that the reason you're doing that is because the board delegated that authority to you. So we as a board could step in at any time.
Yeah. And say we want this added, we want this subtracted.
Add this date or
Again, it goes back to the board reserving
Think about
that
all the
right.
consternation that would have saved us with this whole band issue this year, right? If Justin submitted something that said, "Hey, I'm only going to do 8 football games instead of 9," or 9 instead of 10, and I'm not doing the parade, and he submitted that to you guys in August. Well, hell, we would have,
would have preempted it.
None of that would have happened, right? Like,
it would have been preemptive.
He would have understood clearly right up front that, no, Justin, you're doing that extra football game, and we expect you to be here. You figure out how you're going to get it done,
but
right?
before he first sees the kids at band camp,
he needs to present that to us.
Sure.
He needs to have.
Approval.
He could be approved. We could fire him if he didn't want to agree with what we wanted to do. So maybe you still keep them in June, but there has to be let's say a July 15th or whatever it is deadline where they have to submit their plan for the following year.
Or to their high school principal or whoever. But I mean, you guys need to have the conversation. Look, this is the way things have always been done. This is what the expectations are, and so on and so forth. So when you guys are putting together your plan, understand what that plan is, because if it deviates from that, we might flag it, and you may have to decide. And if they say, well, look, I don't want to meet 9 times a year. I only want to do this 3 times a year. Well, then you're not our candidate.
Right.
Thanks so much. We're going to get somebody.
The more I think about it, I think when I was principal at Twin Valley, we used to have a process. Now, this is because this is starting to ring a bell. We used to do something like that. To the activities all had to turn in like a. I have to see if they still do that. But I think we're onto something here. I'm just still concerned about how we want to word it in here.
I think talk to Subers. I mean, he's going to review this stuff anyways. I mean, my biggest concern was how does he word it so that the board always maintains the authority and the discretion to step in whenever we want, and 2, that contractually there's going to be no conflicts going forward. So a new board sitting around here, they haven't had this discussion about policy. Hell, these policies end up in a shelf somewhere. No one ever looks at them unless you review them every 10 years. And it only comes up when there's an issue, right? So 9 new board members 5 years from now never know what the policy is regarding extracurriculars because it never comes up. Well, the contract may get negotiated 3 times between now and then. If there's some sort of conflict between the contract and our policy, that part of the contract should be null and void. We shouldn't have to change our policy to reflect the collective bargaining agreement. It should be vice versa.
Yeah. I agree. I agree with that wholeheartedly.
There's a place in it's one of these policies where I've seen that. I don't know where it was. It's an employment or something. We've got that provision in one of the bodies of the. And just copying that and putting it in here too, I think, is important because I think that's how we got in the issue with the PIAA. Is somebody said, "Well, wait a minute, we're doing extra work, and so now, all right, now we're going to change our policy to reflect."
Now, should you, with talking sports, let's say go to sports, and then if your band gets tacked on to, because we put that in a separate category. Should Goose have to submit to Gary every year this defined season for every sport?
I think there's probably.
Why would you not?
You put together a schedule anyways, right?
Yeah, because when we
But
get
it doesn't.
the calendar,
It doesn't say extended season or you know what I'm saying, like.
I think the season is I think by default, knowing what their conversation's been, that the season should include extended season. Right?
Right.
So that if somebody does get to a championship or somebody at the TSA does get to the state finals for Odyssey of the Mind, that everybody understands that that's not extra, right? That that's part of your job and duty and your responsibility and your salary, that you're going to see these kids through to the end of whatever it is they accomplish.
But you can't do that with sports right now.
That's because we have a policy that's in place. Now, anything else? We have a policy that says what that reflects our contract.
Right.
And that's what I want to avoid going forward. I don't want creating policies to reflect our contract. I want our contract to reflect our policies. That's something we're going to have to correct in 3 years when that comes up. But for everything else...
Because none of the clubs ever have expected, even when
they
go
into summer. Think about it this way. What if
they don't get extra
Think about basketball, right? So basketball, they have invitationals. Right. They got all these different things. That's extra season, right? It's not part of the regular season. It's not part of the extended season.
They build their schedule a year in advance.
Yeah, what I'm saying is...
But that's not extra
something
pay.
Comes up and someone says, oh, we're going to do an invitational. All right, we're going to do the invitational. That should be part of the overall thing, right? I don't want some new basketball coach saying, well, that's extra. I should get paid more.
No, because they use it by a date. Anything that happens from
I hear you.
a date to another date. That's how they've been doing it.
Because we are not, from a governance beyond our scope standpoint, PIAA makes it very clear as to when students can actually congregate to practice for sports.
Okay, well, we're going to get too far in the weeds with this, but I think, I was told by a football player when they were waiting for a football coach, hey, look, we need to be in the gym working out and doing whatever. And I'm like,
Well,
what
that was
stops you from doing that now? Well, technically our coach isn't supposed
That's
to be there
correct.
anywhere, but he really is, and has us on a regimen. And so, but now he's quote unquote done, even though he's still in school, and it's like this whole thing, right? And you're going,
It's like a secret society. I mean, I'll just be honest about it. They're not allowed to do it.
That's
They're
right.
allowed to have these open gyms.
Against PIAA.
The only thing that you can't do is penalize a kid or force a kid to come to those sessions, and they can't be like you can't be out there doing plays and doing. They lift weights.
look, I was
they do
told
this.
just the other day, a week or 2 weeks ago, hey, girls basketball coach is going to retire or something, or stop doing
He
this.
resigned.
He resigned, okay? And then the question was, well, what are you guys going to do about the new girls basketball coach? And I said, well, hell, we don't have to worry about it until November. For crying
That's
out
correct.
And they was like, well, no, you don't. Basketball camps start in 3 weeks. And I was
You want to talk about endorse? We don't endorse those
I
things.
hear
We
you,
don't.
but
We're not
that's-
connected to them. And
basketball camps are in the summer, basketball camps in the spring. We got basketball camp tournaments we got to go to. And It's all about the team and the coaches involved. And I was like, holy crap.
those kids are not obligated, nor can they be, quote, penalized or cut from a team because they don't go to those.
Yeah, I hear you.
Well, I have to go on record saying that because
it's on the
When it
it's on the
comes down
minutes.
to them submitting a little syllabus or whatever you're looking for, the clubs, and I know this came up before, the cost of a club, is there any way in which they could put on there what they think the cost of that club might be for the student?
we've done that.
Oh, I didn't, okay.
We didn't post it
What
yet.
about
It's
the-
been done.
All right. What about the fundraising aspect of it? 'Cause
Fundraising is
they're
that
gonna do-
no one's obligated to do fundraising. Fundraising is at the discretion. If any club wanted to meet and not raise one dime, they don't have to. There's no affirmative obligation for any organization to go out and fundraise. But if they want to do things that we don't have budgeted, then that's their option.
Because that might be something that they might want to bring up to the students, that they're going to do 5 or 6 fundraisers.
And if they would,
We were doing fundraisers
if we implement this plan that we're talking about, that's part of their syllabus.
Right.
Fundraising will be a part of this club.
Okay, that's what I was.
I wouldn't say mandatorily. They might say we may do some fundraising.
Right.
So at least you heard that going in.
Right.
Whether you ever do or don't becomes a moot point as long as you at least put somebody on notice. Part of this club's activity is going to require that you sell peanut butter cups,
Right.
whatever it is.
Yeah, because there's a lot of fundraising.
No, there absolutely
People
is.
don't know about.
A lot of it's very positive.
All right. I would like to move on.
You're the committee chair.
All right, we're going to move
Let's
on.
review that one more time.
Well, what's the walk away with this right now? I don't want to just.
I think
We
you got
spent
homework out of this by the time.
Yeah,
We spent 45 minutes here. There's got to be a walk
I think
away.
the walk away. Well, at least my points on this. I didn't want to get into a big brouhaha about this. I mean, I wrote a simple paragraph, which was something saying that the board. I just want the power and communicate this to.
I have it written down here.
I want the board to reserve the power to change, edit, whatever the schedules and frequency and everything else that has to do with the meeting times and places of these events.
But for
That's
you,
pretty clear.
for you to say that administratively, and I can tell Anne Marie and I are thinking out loud here, there's going to be some changes in the way we're going to need to do things to manage
we
that.
can delegate.
No, I
And
understand
designate
that.
you guys to administer that. But I think that's part of it. And the second part of it is I want some sort of clause in there that says that our policy governs, and any collective bargaining contract or employment contract that has a stipulation in there that's contrary to the policy is automatically, that portion of that contract is null and void.
Let me turn that on it.
We have that.
I was just going to say.
We wrote that for.
It's in someplace else, though.
But
It's not-
before,
Wrote it, yes.
before, and I know this is for future generations of board members, and when we're all out of this room and someone's looking at this again, the way you need to do that is to make sure that you negotiate per your policy.
We will.
Yeah.
But
That hasn't
now, here's the
happened.
thing, though. Here's the thing: is you can negotiate in ignorance of your policy,
Which you should never do.
which you should never do. But by structuring your policy to state that all contracts should reflect the policy, okay, you've now got that in writing. You voted on it. That's in place. So if somebody goes out and negotiates or makes an amendment or an addendum to a contract, like we did
Right.
2 years
Right,
ago, right? And if there's something in there that's in conflict with our policies, guess what? Whatever you negotiated is null and void, period. Whether you knew what the policy said or didn't know what the policy said, it's for the protection of the school district.
Oh, I understand that.
And so what you're saying is, I don't
was
want
just kind of a
somebody
word of
who already
advice.
knows what the policy says and does something contrary to that, and then you say, well, which one governs? This clearly says this governs, right? The policy should always govern. Always.
So that's the big picture. We want the administration to come back with the wording and the implementation.
Yeah, we have it. Andrew and I put it in another policy.
We need
It's already
to
approved.
we need to flag those policies that have that kind of verbiage in it for future board members as well. So when they do go to collective bargaining, they can say, I've got a list of 10 policies that govern how I can bargain with this organization. So we need, as we do these, we should have some kind of flag on the policies.
Well, there should be a
that-
flag in any kind of contract that says this contract is subject to review to conform with existing governing documents and blah, blah, blah. And any provisions of this contract that are in conflict with the governing documents of the district are considered null and void. I mean, it almost has to be that clause in there. So it's incumbent on both.
on the contract.
On the
side.
contract.
On the contract side, yeah. But think of the daunting task it would be if you were negotiating a contract.
You had to go through this,
and you had a stack of policies and trying to say, where are my boundaries here? Let me look through every single policy to find out.
That's why you have an attorney.
Yeah.
But two, I think, but that's what happens is I agree with you, and I think the issue is it's easy then to negotiate something, right? That comes around and bites you in the rear end, and I think that's what happened with the athletics was we negotiated something, and then somebody said, oh, well, it's easier to change our policy than it is to go back and argue with the union, right? But what they should have done is gone back and argued with the union and said, no, we made a mistake. You made a mistake. You were the other party to this contract. You had an obligation to read these things too. Mm-hmm. You didn't do it. I didn't do it. Shame on us. But this part of our contract isn't going to work, so we've got to figure something else out.
And it's in 000, very last paragraph. All contracts approved by the board shall be developed so as not to conflict with current board policy or administrative guideline.
Right, so there it is. All right, so it's covered.
It's in, if you want to make a note, it's in 000.
No, but obviously that didn't come new in 000. That's probably been in 000.
No, Andrew and I wrote it. It's still in italic.
Oh, you mean
we added that this year?
You mean that wasn't in prior?
No.
Which was what allowed the problem we got into.
We wrote that in. So.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
All right,
so that's
114.
Yeah. Okay. Sorry.
Okay.
Moving on to
that one to death. For
Moving on to 115.
We're going to be falling asleep here.
Yeah, I want to try to get out of here as close to 9 as possible. But I don't know. Let's go to 115, and this is Interscholastic Athletics.
This is again just bringing it up to. We actually took a look at some other policies and culled them and put in things that we think there's no. The only thing that you're going to see in here is there's not very much school code guideline on interscholastic athletics because it's not required in the school code. So you're not going to see a lot of legal citations. That citation that you're there at 511 is that catch-all in the school code that says boards have the right to regulate whatever they have under their jurisdiction.
This is just more of a philosophical outline of what.
I had one comment on here, which was what page is it? Doesn't have the page number. Page 3 of that policy.
Go ahead.
You go to line 10. Guy struck out or family physician. So the board shall determine the standards of eligibility met by all students participating in the interscholastic program. Such standards are required that each student, before participating in any activity, be covered by student accident insurance, be in good physical condition, and be free of injury as determined by the district physician. But you eliminated or family physician. And I'm just kind of curious,
Yeah, why did we strike that? I'm not.
If I've got an orthopedic surgeon who's who approves my kid to go play, but the district physician who's just a GP says, well, no, I don't feel comfortable with it. Well,
I thought that was the physician, on the sideline at a football game. If he sees a problem,
that's not the way I read this, though. This says that...
No, this refers to the preseason physicals that the kids get.
this, I read this said that eligible, this talks about eligibility. You're not eligible if the district physician determines that you
Have some illness that would preclude you from being involved.
Yeah, you're not free of injury. And, maybe we want all that power vested in the school physician. I'm asking the question. I mean, I see it used to be family physician there. I mean, if my family says, "Hey, look, it's okay. My kid, he's got a limp, but we're okay with it. We want him to play."
I think if you have a written a statement that says that they're eligible to play, you could do it. We could keep both of them in there.
Yeah, I'm not so sure. Yeah, we can. Let me check with PIAA standards. We can unstrike that. We'll just make a note of that before we bring it forward.
I was just curious.
No, that's
in one
a
sense,
good note.
maybe it's best that the district physician has the final say, because you get somebody who said, you can get any quack to write a note saying my kid's eligible, even though he's got a concussion, let him go in and play, and you maybe need the district physician to say, "Hey, no, wait a minute, no, we have the final say. Your kid had a concussion. We don't want him playing."
Right.
So I'm not saying it should go back in. I'm just asking the question.
Subers might be able to weigh in on that too.
And then the only other comment I had on here was I like the off-campus conduct. I thought that was a nice touch.
Yeah, we hadn't really dealt with that before.
Now, it goes in here under guidelines, under number 5 on page 5, and you talk about males participating in certain female teams, and you bar males from participating, like on field hockey and stuff like that. That's fine, although I think I read somewhere recently there's some boy who's playing field hockey somewhere.
I heard about that.
And a lot of boys are actually now starting to play field hockey. I guess what I didn't see any here is girls being barred from any particular type of male team. And I'm thinking because there's a couple of cases out there across the United States where girls are playing football and
They're wrestling.
They do wrestle.
And they wrestle. So I don't know whether that's something we want to talk about eliminating here or not. I don't know whether
We
boys are
again,
feel...
we took this from another district's policy because they've had it in place. We can certainly send it over to Subers to make sure it passes Title IX muster.
I mean,
this
on one
hasn't
hand,
been
you're barring boys from participating because you don't want the girls to get hurt, but then you're going to say, okay, well, girls can go play football where they might get hurt.
This is
or they
modeled,
might play wrestling where a boy can rip her arm off or put her in a sleeper hold and knock him out. I don't know. It just seems...
We can have, we'll ask Brian to review that, because I had a concern that the Title IX is not cited in this policy as well. So we can take a look at that.
Isn't that what authority is? Does that address Title IX?
No, Title IX is not listed here. 22 Section 510 is school code. I don't know that we need to cite Title IX here or not.
I thought it did cite Title IX somewhere in here. I see you have school code, but I thought you addressed the issue of delegation response. The superintendent shall ensure that similar athletic programs are offered to both sexes in proportion to the district's enrollment. That's on the bottom of page 4.
Yeah, but we didn't list actual.
You don't.
Usually in the column you should have the reference.
Yeah.
But that's what that's saying. Yes. And like you said, these all have to go to Subers anyway for his additional review. All right, we'll take that one forward with possible edits.
Next up is 1 to 16 summer school.
Just for the record, we're going to have to strike the one thing there that says 22 Section 5.9. That section of the school code or the state board regulations was rescinded.
All right.
I noticed at the end of the first page of that, line 36, you strike out maintaining a financially self-sufficient program. Isn't that just on the first page of 116 at the very bottom, line 36?
Because we just left it with the first sentence. You have to approve what I pay, what I charge, and when I ask you to approve it, I explain I figured it out based on self-supporting, and there could be an opportunity where you want me to run something and you're willing to have district funds So you pre-approve anything before we sponsor it anyhow?
Yeah, I know that's your practice, but let's say you retire in a couple of years and we've got some other assistant superintendent who's running this program and it just says, well, board's going to establish the fees. Doesn't say any. This allows the board to run deficits or profits.
Yeah, we'll keep it
willy-nilly. I just
Sure.
think whatever program we're running in the summer ought to be just self-sufficient program, financially self-sufficient program. And if it's not, and you want to bring it to the board, hey, look, we can't run it because we're not going to run it at a loss, well, then the board can step in and say, okay, well, we'll fund it out of fund balance or whatever, the deficit or...
Yeah, that's no big deal. We'll put it back in.
Does anybody else have any issue with that?
I don't have an issue.
It's fine.
I personally would like to see a budget before we actually sit down and look at summer school, because I know someday you might retire, and I don't know how you keep your budget for each program. Is it a before budget, after the program's run?
It's figured on the participation of X number of students. It's a standard formula that I use for each activity, times the benefits and the cost in the contract for the individual or individuals that are going to be doing it at a per hourly rate. And we figure out how many hours, and then there's an established for every 2 hours of teaching, they get a half-hour prep. So before it ever starts, like if you wanted to do summer theater camp, then I would say to you, how many weeks do you want to run it? I want to run it 8 days. Then I figure out based on their contract by a standard formula, this is what it would cost. If we divide it by 10 kids, this is what it would cost. How many kids do you want to set as your minimum? And they'll say to me like 15. If we don't get 15, we don't run it.
Right. Do we see that before we actually approve it?
Yes, it's in that paper that I hand to you. It has a minimum and maximum number of students.
Right. But I didn't see the breakdown in that organized format, other than I saw the teachers, and then I saw that we were going to pay them $37, and then, I mean, it would just seem to be more random. It wasn't like in a format, like a spreadsheet that I saw. I didn't see something like in a spreadsheet prior to approving. So
no, because if I have a minimum of 15 people and I say it's going to cost $100, that would tell you it's $1,500 to run the program. Salaries.
Okay, I'm just curious. I don't remember seeing something that like said, okay, here's what we're going to run. Here's what budget, like a budget format for the whole summer program.
I do it not by the whole program, because I don't carry a profit into somebody else's loss. Everyone has to break even separately.
Which, I mean, if you're running a zero budget year after year after year, whether it's a $10,000 budget or a $5,000 budget, does it?
In the red.
I guess I'm just thinking in the future. I guess will everyone be able to follow?
I mean, I have
how you do it.
Well, it wouldn't matter because it's predicated on it being self-sustaining. So the budget is always going to be X in, X out. It's always going to be zero. No obligation to the district, and you can't potentially have a cost overrun because you're saying if you don't have the money to cover your costs, this isn't happening.
Yeah,
we don't submit the money to the business office till we get the minimum number of students. I hold the checks.
Okay.
So if somebody is...
It's like a prepay.
I send back the checks to the parents.
Oh, okay.
Nobody runs until they get their minimum.
Okay.
Sometimes it's the day before they get their minimum.
Yeah.
So we're monitoring it all the way up to... Right. And then at the end, I give the board...
We can provide you with a post report that says X number of things happened. This is how many kids participated.
I do that now.
Yeah,
that's what I'm saying.
Now. I've seen that before.
But knowing how much all that was becomes irrelevant because it was at no cost other than to the families.
Okay.
The board has incurred no cost per se. I mean, we've let them use the facilities, but we've had them pay the tuition to cover the salary of the person that used it.
So when the board approves my proposed program for the summer, the understanding is that I'm not running anything that doesn't meet that minimum that I have listed for each program on that sheet.
Okay.
All right.
All right.
Okay.
Does anybody else have any comments on policy 116? All right, let's move on to 117, class size.
My only comment there was on the first page, line 21. It says courses that do not meet minimum class size will be offered in alternate years. Shouldn't that read may be offered? I mean, because if you don't meet class size in year one, you don't meet class size in year.
Actually, I would take it out.
Take it out completely.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm fine with that.
Yeah.
It just
That
seemed
way
to me
you don't
that
even commit to, let's go
anytime
back
I
to your,
see will or shall, light bulbs go off
but
in
your
my head.
conversation of maybe we need to eliminate as many electives. Well, if you've made this in your policy that next year you're going to run that
Oh, yeah.
one, now you've committed to it.
Yeah,
So just take it out.
That's a good idea to take it out.
Yeah.
All right. So we're striking that, Dr. Otto? All right.
If that's the flavor of the committee.
Yep.
And then the only other thing as far as my comments were, is on somewhere down here. Oh yeah, last page,
It's only one
line
page.
4. It says parents may obtain an explanation of the results of their child's test from a qualified school personnel.
Oh, you.
Yeah, that's on.
Oh, you're on page 118. You jumped policies.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, last page of 118.
We're now on
line,
assessments.
First
line
page.
four.
Right along.
First page.
Oh,
On,
I'm sorry. Did I miss?
yeah, you're on a new.
Yeah.
Yeah, 117 is only one page.
Yeah. All right. Sorry, I skipped.
So we
Really wanna get back
117's in bed. It's done.
All right. Anybody else on 117? Anything?
117.
No, we moved on.
All right, moving on to the second page of 117. All right, 118 assessments. If nobody
Okay,
else
now.
The reason we changed this is
118, second page, line number 4 says parents may obtain an explanation of the results of their child's test from qualified school personnel. I'm just curious, why wouldn't the parent be allowed to get an explanation of their test results?
the
Do we have any HIPAA regulation?
no.
I mean,
This language, first of all, I don't know the exact answer to that, but just to give you a general overview first. All of this language was changed because it used to reflect what the state's input was in district testing back in the 1980s. So this now represents what we do vis-a-vis with PSSAs and everything else that happens there. So to answer that question, Anne-Marie, I'm not real sure.
Because we don't, we no longer establish the explanation for how your child did with Pennsylvania state assessments. The state does.
Parents don't get their child's PSSA scores?
Yes, a document comes to us from the state and we send it on to you. So we could interpret it for you.
I see.
But it's
really,
not our
as a
district.
parent, if I have a question about the PSSAs, I need to call the state.
Or say, do I understand this correctly? And I could say, well, it's not my cut score, it's what they say your child should be doing. So I can't talk to you
Okay,
about
that
the
makes
cut
sense.
score.
Okay.
Yeah,
I'm all right with that.
yeah.
See, and Andrew, if you look
I saw
at
the next paragraph where it says,
it says
disseminate
we
the
can
information.
disseminate that
Right.
information.
Yeah.
Now, this policy is only reflective of standardized tests, state mandated tests. This isn't, and it's not individual class tests, right? Because it
Correct.
does say assessments, but I don't think it specifies.
We have an assessment schedule
Okay.
that's approved and also part of your strategic plan, and you saw that last month when I added the keystone. Those are the things that this type of a document.
This ties in with, if you notice now, it ties in with the state's strategic planning process. Because if you notice on page 2 under authority, it says the assessment plan shall be described in the district's strategic plan. So there's a corollary document that will show you what the assessment plan is. And that's dictated by Chapter 4 regulations of the state board regulations. And again, we'll make sure Super sees all these, but
Yeah.
if you're ready, if we have these ready, we'll get these revised and get a first reading in June on these.
Okay, sounds good. Anything else? Any comments? Anything else we'd like to talk about? Chapter 9.
I think the two biggest ones there are 004, getting some sort of process in place,
Yes.
and then with 114,
Yep, I have that written
really
down.
talking about the board's ability to.
Right.
Before bringing 114 up, and when 004 is worked out, before bringing them for first reading, I think it would be good to bring it back to the committee first.
That's your call.
So I'd like
It'll
to
slow
do
it
that.
down, but
I think we should look over
then it won't be
before we
on.
send it out.
It won't
I
be
think
on
04 definitely should be reviewed by
Yeah.
the committee first.
Yes.
Yeah, I think both of them probably could.
because there's no hurry.
Yeah. If you can get it done by next month, that would be great, and we can look over it at the beginning of that
Just
meeting.
wanted to comment before we close out. There will be some policies that we'll be bringing forward for sheer deletion that are in this book. Two of them tonight are the current 104, which is the one on affirmative action for programs for employment and contract practices, which we did over with.
Yeah.
You remember we did those? Some of these are just so obsolete,
Yeah.
they'll just be presented to you, but you officially have to delete them. So we'll put them on. Do they have to go through a first reading and second reading for deletion?
No, you just.
I think you just delete them. And the second one is programs, adoption of courses of study. This is no longer applicable because the state law that used to govern it is no longer applicable. So it will be.
All right.
It's
106.
106. It's called adoption of courses of study.
Connor, are you planning a meeting in June, or you're
Yes,
gonna
I'd
be
like
in
to.
August?
I'd like to have
No,
one in June.
So just for the record, I wanted to enter into the record that policies, the current policies 104 and 106 will be brought up for the old policies 104 and 106 will be brought up for deletion.
All right. Okay, then we're going to be meeting next month in June, and we'd like to look at 004 and 114, and then continue with the 100s and get into the 200s, hopefully.
It's kind of our goal to bring you about anywhere from 8 to 10 policies a night. It seems to fit about an hour and a half to 2 hour time frame.
All right.
It gives you opportunity to really discuss them at length, which I think is important.
Yeah.
If we're going to do this right, I had said to you from the beginning that this is probably going to be a long process, but I think it's worth taking the time to do it. It's either that or pay somebody $10,000 to come in and do it. So
I think it's better that the board looks over it.
Absolutely.
The committee as representatives.
It helps us as board members
Yeah.
too, really
Yeah.
get in touch with these.
Well, it's actually very instructive.
Yeah,
It's a
interesting.
good process.
All right, well, meeting adjourned at 9:06.